My name is Darren Hupke, and this is Pixels and Polygons, part of the Soundstone Network. Welcome to a new episode of Pixels and Polygons. I am Darren Hupke, the host of the show. If you are a returning listener, thank you so much for coming back and checking out another episode. Hopefully this is another entertaining one for you, and I appreciate you for coming back week after week. If you are new, it's a simple pitch. I sit down with a guest each week and I ask them a video game related prompt or question, and we talk about it. It's 20 to 40 minutes or so each episode. This can stem from topics like what's a underappreciated or below average game you love that doesn't get enough attention, or what is your history with video games? When did you start playing and when did you fall in love with them? Or why do you play the games that you play? It could be a lot of different things. The conversations can go in a lot of different directions, but the point is just to have a great and thoughtful conversation that maybe sparks your own ideas or your own interests as a listener to think about your own responses and hopefully just have some fun along the way. If you like what you hear and you want to support the show, I've got a few different ways you can do that. I have links in the show notes below to everything that I do, and I'll highlight one of those in particular. Pixels and Polygons Quarterly is, as you guessed it, a quarterly magazine about retro video games. It evolved from my retro gamezine project. Instead of covering a single game in a month, it is now a quarterly release where I cover a few different games in each issue. There's an overarching theme with every issue, and I'll have an original essay that ties all of the games together. But in addition to that, you'll have individual game histories and development details, personal experiences from all the different writing contributors, scans of magazines, manuals, artwork, even of the era, like reviews, a lot of details and artifacts if you are a fan of those games or a fan of the games in that era. The goal is to highlight and cover games that maybe aren't the AAA top 10 of all time type games, but games that deserve some attention and maybe forgotten and maybe a whole new generation should discover and enjoy. So hopefully you enjoy what you read. Quarterly release, you can find them on pixelsandpolygons.net in a physical format, or you can find them over on my Patreon in my digital store. A few different options for you, so check those out. Links in the show notes below. With that out of the way, we can start the episode right after an ad from one of our Soundstone Network partners.
Listen to Flashback 64, the chronological Nintendo 64 podcast. Hosts Gooey, McKenna, and friends flashback to the 90s and early 2000s with a look at the Nintendo 64's catalog and its contemporary cultural and historical context. Starting with the console's launch titles and proceeding in release order, we discuss classics like GoldenEye, Super Mario 64, and Star Fox 64, as well as some not-so-beloved games, lesser-known titles, and everything in between. Along with game-specific deep dives, we also cover other bits of pop culture from the time, like films, music, and more. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Pixels and Polygons, a conversational podcast about video games. I am Darren Hupke, and this week, another new guest joins the show. I'm really excited. This year's been really good. I keep saying this in a lot of the episodes, but this year's been really good about having like a lot of new people and new voices, and that always brings new stories and new interesting conversations. So joining me this week is Fredo. Welcome to the show, Fredo. How are you?
Hey, Darren, I'm doing great. I'm delighted to be here. So thanks so much.
Yeah, I've heard you on a few episodes of some of our Soundstone Network sister shows, and you just seem like a good time. So I was really excited to invite you on and have you here and all that stuff. So I'm curious to see where this goes, and hopefully record a few episodes with you to learn more about you and everything. But for those of you for those of the listeners who don't know who you are, do you mind giving us a little introduction? Tell us who you are, what you do, anything that maybe you want to like highlight and share or promote or plug. This is our chance to learn a little about you. So tell us who you are, Fredo.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you know me, you probably know me as just a poster. So I'm Fredo Fabrucci. It's fredo.bsky.social. I'm on Bluesky, where I'm primarily posting is where you can find me. I love video games. I have a sort of lifelong fascination, like a lot of folks. I've been enjoying doing the rounds on some of these Soundstone shows. Had a lot of really interesting conversations with folks. I really enjoy talking about this stuff on multiple levels. As far as my background, I post about it sometimes, but I'm an academic, even though you probably wouldn't be able to tell from the caliber of posting I typically do. But I'm a psychologist, and I work in the research part of that field. So one of the things I'm fascinated by, and one of the things we'll spend a little bit of time talking about today, and possibly touching on it at other points, is the psychological aspects around video games, how video games impact culture and people's perceptions of them, and all sorts of stuff there. I'm a big nerd about the hobby and the field, and spend a lot of time thinking about it and speculating about various aspects of the fandom. So it's a lot of fun to think about, a lot of fun to talk about. And yeah, I mean, that's really about it. I'm always toying with the idea of maybe doing a podcast or something myself, but have not done that yet. You can find me guesting on a lot of stuff. I'm often on the Hell Zone with my buddy Arlen, a great podcast about Hell Zone movies, which is a blast. And I stream on Twitch as well. It's Fredo Fabrucci. I would say go to my Bluesky and you could get the link there. So if you enjoy hearing me talk about games on here, I often have a lot of similar types of conversations on my stream. So yeah, appreciate the opportunity to plug some of that stuff.
Cool. Yeah, I will put the link to your Twitch in the show notes as well then. So people, if you're actively listening to this episode, that means it's already been edited, which means there's already notes filled out for it, which means it should be right available to you right now, right there below whatever podcast listener you're listening to. So follow, subscribe, do whatever it is that you do on Twitch. Yes. And do those things.
Yes, follow me, cowards. Yes, subscribe, do it all. Send me all your money.
All right. Well, we like to kick things off with an icebreaker, yeah, there's not really any rhyme or reason to it. I've got like a library of them here I pull from. Actually, I'm going to pull this one. This one I've only used once before. This actually comes from a Patreon supporter. So one of the perks of backing and supporting me on Patreon, even at the dollar tier or the higher tier, you can submit a question. And if I choose it, I'll shout you out and use your question on the show. So this one actually comes from Sean Douglas from Kirby Conversation and Millennium Edition, a fellow Sandstone network producer and everything, so it's not a total stranger or anything, but you can have one just like Sean has here. This question for you, what is a platforming level theme you would want to see, and what unique challenges would a character face in that setting? So to kind of help underline that, yeah, there's always like the lava level where you can't touch the lava, and there's geysers going off and volcanoes going off around you, or there's the ice level where you slip and slide around, and you can't necessarily get the platforming.
Course,
so
yeah.
Anything like standard or basic or like creative and inventive, but what would be a platforming level theme you would want to see, and what would be the unique challenge you'd like to have players go through in that level?
Yeah, great question, which, by the way, I'm a big fan. This is one of those things I talk about on stream sometimes. That's one of those old-timey video game tropes that I have a lot of appreciation for, of having these sort of, I guess I'd call them biome-themed levels, like the lava level, like the ice level. Generally a big fan of ice levels. One of the ones that I like, not completely original, I've seen it in a number of games, and I feel like it's maybe getting a little more attention lately because of Astrobot from a few years ago, is the style that's like inside a computer or inside like a digital world and interacting with, circuitry and switches to make things pop up. A lot of times the gimmicks are around reappearing and disappearing things tied to the nature of it being a computer. That's one that comes to mind. I mean, I'm like I mentioned, a big fan of a lot of the classic tropes. I'm trying to think of something original. It's hard to think of original things, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially given how many different types of gimmicky platforming levels are out there. One of the other, again, it's not original, but it's a trope I've seen in a few things. Another thing I dig is when you are in an environment that's somehow like encased or pressurized. So something like a Dead Space or something like a BioShock, or one example that comes to mind is Spec Ops: The Line, which was not necessarily the most creative game gameplay wise, but I like it when games like to use the inside environment versus the outside environment, and they have something like, oh, you can shoot at this wall and water will flood into the room, or in the case of Spec Ops: The Line, it was sand. You were in a building that was like halfway buried in sand, and you could like fill up rooms by shooting at windows and flooding the room with sand and getting enemies stuck in it. Like that's a mechanic that I often find interesting. So that's another potential answer for this one. That's what comes to mind for me, at least.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I mean, they like, I think it's like with better and more modern hardware, when you can see like physics, like not just be like water physics or like the standard physics, but when you see like weight disbursement and weird things happening from like sand and things like that, could be really rad and like a fun designery choice and all that stuff. So no, that's cool. All right. Well, yeah, that's it. This show moves on pretty quickly. We're ready to get into the main topic if you are ready to go there. I sent you a list of questions and you selected a few that stood out to you. But for this one, it's a newer question I have that I created for this quote unquote season 3 that I am in. So I like the idea of being able to finally answer this question. And it sounds like it might be coming in waves with a few future guests. But this question is, do you interact with games outside of playing them? So what other ways do you stay involved with this hobby, like reading, writing, talking, drawing, etc.? Like, what is your connection to video games outside of gaming itself? I'd love to hear what that is and what that means for you.
Yeah, and it's a lot. I mean, I was eager to pick this one. Like I mentioned a little bit ago, I'm an academic, so I've done some stuff in the research world with video games, and I read quite a lot of video game research. I'm very fascinated by like the culture around video games and how it's evolved and developed over the years. So I like to read books about that topic as well. I'm actually currently sitting on my desk right now. I have Jason Schreier's book on Blizzard, Play Nice, which I'm enjoying a lot so far. Yeah, really good. And I recently read, now I don't have it in front of me. Was it A Life Well Wasted? Mike Drucker's book on games, which I also found really cool. And I've read Stephen Kent's book and a lot of different things I enjoy very much. I go to a lot of I'm a big geek in general, and I like to go to like conventions and stuff, and I'm a little older and have been going for a long time, so that's another aspect that I enjoy, is seeing the way gaming has evolved and developed in those spaces. But definitely as a psychologist, the sort of culture around gaming and how it's developed and how it's perceived and how people think about video game fandom, both positively and negatively, is something I'm very much fascinated by, very much engaged with. Again, if you follow me online, you probably see me talk about this stuff a lot because I find it endlessly fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Mike Drucker book, the Good Game No Rematch, I believe.
Good Game No Rematch, that was it. Yeah. Yes. A Life Well Wasted was somebody else's book, I think, and now I can't remember who. But great stuff. Would recommend all of those things.
Yeah, his book's fantastic. He's been a guest on the show actually in the past, and he contributed some writing to one of my previous Retro Game Zine issues as well. So shout outs to Mike Drucker again for being an awesome person. person. But so that side of things, like you being interested in that and like kind of reading in that, and even from like your profession, like have you ever had the interest to like unite those two things and maybe either like write or study or investigate like a theory or an idea or something, that a trend that you're seeing happening like in the gaming space yourself? Like, is that ever an avenue you'd maybe want to like merge these two things together in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I have. This is where it gets interesting. I'm very keen on maintaining kayfabe, so I never say my real name or who I really am. But I have worked in that field. I've done a few different projects related to different aspects of video games. So academically, a couple of the things, or a few of the things I focused on. One area that I find very interesting in a less positive way, because it's moving in a direction that I had unfortunately anticipated a number of years ago, is in the what I like microtransactions and transactions within games. The various in consumer psychology, one of the things you hear about is like compliance techniques in regards to economic psychology, or whatever, the various sorts of tricks that people use. Tricks is maybe putting it meanly, although in this context it often is trickery. To get people to part with their money, right? To let go of some cash in exchange for whatever this experience might be. Video games have adapted a lot of very insidious, like Skinner box type tricks in order to get people to maximally spend their money. And many games, not all of them, obviously, thankfully, but many games have these, treadmills of continually funneling you into spending more money, and the season layout that a number of games use, and these sort of diminishing returns of you getting less stuff as you level up more. Then it takes advantage of the sunk cost effect, that the more time you spend playing the game, the more likely you are to want to invest further into it. That was stuff I was doing a lot of work in that field in like the early 2010s, especially focusing on different types of microtransactions in like MMOs and like cosmetic versus non-cosmetic, and what's going to work better and what constraints and how it might impact the player base and perceptions of the game. Another area that I find interesting in a more positive way is the social aspect of gaming. This is another area where, the culture I find very interesting. If you are an old head like me, you probably recall quite a lot of negative coverage about video games and rather sensationalistic, in my opinion, coverage around how video games make you violent and they have all this bad stuff and they're so bad for you, and they're training the next generation of serial killers and what have you. And I've done some work in that area too, and I could maybe talk about that in a bit. But often glossed over is the way video games can be helpful in terms of helping people form relationships, especially people that are maybe a little bit more socially awkward or nervous, and they're able to maybe get a little bit of those interactions with other people through video games and through the fandom of video games. There's a lot of really interesting research around video games helping people keep their brains sharp and develop skills like around things like spatial cognition or logic and problem solving. They can actually be very, very helpful as people age, and to keep your brain sharp as you age. In fact, I posit that our generation, as we get older, we're likely to have less of an issue with dementia. It'll be less widespread because it's been proven that engaging in various mental games and puzzle games, and often the logic of the puzzles that you have to solve in video games, even action games or whatever, can help to keep your brain sharp. So those are all areas that I find very interesting. I've been very fortunate that I've had the opportunity to do some work in that field, and talk about it in contexts like this. So I'm always eager to guest on podcasts and have conversations with folks about that stuff, because I think it's a really rich and fascinating world, and seeing the way that the research world is developing around video games is very exciting, because it's still relatively young field.
Yeah, that's all really like interesting to me. I mean, you touched on a few things that now I have follow-ups for a few things there. But
sure, yeah.
Like in the concept of like that microtransaction, that like enablement strategy of like like feeding people along and breadcrumbing them into like the engagement through like those season passes, or like that like gated content in that regard. For someone like you who has like tried to think about it psychologically and think about it from like the impact and how it attracts people, do you yourself ever like participate in games that offer that? Like can you separate those two things and know that you are consciously buying into something because you are investing in the entertainment of it, and I can quit anytime, like type of mindset? Or is it
Sure.
do you typically avoid it because of maybe the negative impact you have seen from your research?
Yeah, that is a great question, and it's something I think about a lot, and it is a place where I often joke it's like being able to see the Matrix or whatever, that when I see a game that is heavy on that stuff, I am often unable to not fixate on it, and I am unable to enjoy the game. There are some exceptions. It really depends on how extreme and how predatory they get. So something like Helldivers 2, for instance, yeah, they have the season passes, but you can like earn currency in game, and the rate at which you earn it is not too ridiculous, and it doesn't have too much goofy stuff in terms of like additional fake currencies and diminishing returns and all that kind of stuff. So that's doable. A lot of games that are free to play, because they are throwing so many of those tricks at you at once, and so much stuff is locked behind trying to make you spend money, I can't look past it. There have been many times where I'll like boot up a game, and this is where I'm at with like Call of Duty. Like I was into Call of Duty like 4 when that blew up, and some of the games around that era, and then I check out the new ones, and it's just so many of those things layered on top of each other at once that it spoils it for me. I can't like enjoy the game because all I see is that stuff. And it's not, I'm not saying that as like a knock to anyone that does enjoy those games. I know obviously a lot of people do. But the problem with doing research into that sort of stuff is that when you're inundated with it, it's kind of impossible to not fixate on it, and it's very difficult to turn that part of your brain off. And at the end of the day, I like to play video games for fun and enjoyment, like everybody else. So when I'm overwhelmed like that, I'm no thanks. I can't do it. So there's a lot of stuff, especially a lot of stuff that's in that like free to play or live service stuff, that I just cannot get into, even if it's like something that would be mechanically interesting to me, because I just cannot get over that stuff.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I mean I've fallen into, I mean I don't even want to say it's a trap, because like you, like I understand the development side of it. I understand what a company or developer is doing when they create those types of games. And so if I find an entertaining hook to it and in everything, in my mind, I'm like, well, I'm going to play it for as long as it's entertaining. But the minute like I'm no longer like enjoying this, and it's more of like out of obligation, like I've been able to mentally pull the plug like no problem on many games like that whenever it's come like crossing that bridge, for me. But obviously that's not how and why they're designed. Like they're designed to like catch people and trick them into thinking that like, you must continue if you want to have the best things, like in like you're nickel and diming people into this weird like mental trap and this attachment and this like this unhealthy relationship with the game as if they're participating in it, and instead of just being the target of the consumer aspect of it all. But yeah, it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, brutal.
So yeah, I mean, where do you think this comes from? So to like fast forward way back to young Fredo, then when did you first start knowing like this was both like a hobby you wanted to get into with video games, but also like the career path like through psychology? Did you playing games at an early age, did you recognize some of these things and like that made you curious? Like what was the thing that influenced you to kind of go in this direction and still be so cognizant of being able to like have the two separate but together in your life?
Yeah, another really good question. So I was definitely interested in video games before I was interested in psychology. Psychology was something I fell in love with when I took my first class in college, and I was a little bit older. Um, but looking back, I definitely see how the things coalesce. Having grown up, I got into video games very young. I was 4 or 5 years old, and fell in love with it pretty early. And I remember, especially as this is probably a story that you've heard from plenty of folks, especially as somebody who was a geek and didn't have a lot of friends and didn't do sports or a lot of other hobbies. Video games were a nice escape for me when I was that age of a thing I was able to enjoy. And of course, I was upset to see that, the one thing I found, right here, it is being super villainized in the media by a lot of people that were very obviously out of touch and didn't know what they were talking about. And that was a recurring theme I noticed even when I was very young. I remember, and I've referenced this a lot, this one's like a holy grail, and I wonder if anybody out there is listening to this and you're able to find this, please tweet me, please skeet me on Bluesky. I remember reading an article, and it got covered on early video game internet, because it was around the time Half-Life, the original Half-Life, came out. And one of these newspapers, I'm using I think it might have been like a tabloid. This part of the reason I can't find it is I can't remember what publication it was doing one of these blaming all video games for every time there's a shooting or something, they make sure to mention that the person played video games, and they make sure to go on about it. They were trying to make some tie about some hate crime or whatever to video games, and they had brought up the example of Half-Life, and the point that they made in the article is that the video game Half-Life, quote, rewards you for killing security guards and stealing their guns.
Oh boy.
Now, if you're an enthusiast of video games like me, you would recognize that for what it is, which is to say, sure, you can make a very, very nebulous of, well, technically, if you shoot one of the security guards, they'll drop 8 bullets or whatever because they're all carrying a pistol, and the logic of the game engine is such that if somebody's carrying a weapon, they drop it when they die. But it's obviously a bad faith argument about the intentions of that. The intention of the game is not to shoot the security guards and steal their guns. Those are your allies, and they're helping you, and you're helping them, and you're trying to help them survive. And it's very much explicitly and deliberately a point of the game that's what you're trying to do. But of course, in the mainstream media that was often written by people that were not playing video games, you would see a lot of these obvious bad faith call-outs and villainizations of games, and remember seeing many such stories. But that was one that just got implanted into my brain because it was such a extreme example. And again, if you're similar in age to me and you grew up seeing a lot of those stories, you probably are very familiar with this feeling. And I mean, it's not unlike the similar villainization of tabletop role playing, which I'm also into, and the obvious ridiculous comparisons that connections people trying to make to Satanism and all this kind of stuff. So when I did get a little older, I mean, that was something that always fascinated me, and again, even as a young person, I recognized it as being not earnest, let's say. When I started to get into psychology and I was a little bit older, and I learned a little bit more about some of the mechanisms underpinning some of those social hysterias, I started to put those things together, right? So I would learn about a concept in class, and I'm like, oh, just like when, Fox News would talk about video games in this regard. So, it being kind of my main interest, hobby, and my academic passion, and seeing the places where those things overlapped, I naturally started to make some of those connections and wanting to play around in that world. world. So I does that answer the question?
Yeah. Like definitely. Like, I mean, obviously, like this is I don't think this is more of a back and forth. I think it's me being able to curiously pick at your brain about some of these things. And this is entertaining to me. So if it's not entertaining to anybody else, cool. That's my show. You can deal with it, and you can go listen to the next episode.
I hope it's entertaining to the listeners, folks. I hope you're enjoying this.
I think absolutely. This is very, very fascinating. So are there things out there now, like beyond, like, obviously there's been things now that are attempting to be like regulated and protected, like gacha and like loot boxes and things like that. Like, are there things that you think are still like concerns within this space, whether that's like detrimental to, like, you know, youth, or still, like, much like violence in video games, are there still misunderstandings and I mean, not even misunderstandings, but just wrongly painted ideas that are like modern concerns that you have, or that are like modern thoughts that you have within the game space now?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yes to both of those. So first of all, I do think that there are still a lot of folks out there that are, overhyping connections between, violent and antisocial behaviors and video games, and a lot of trumped up or flawed research. I mean, connections between video games and aggression, having worked in this space a little bit, notoriously difficult to replicate. I've tried to replicate a number of studies myself and was unable to replicate the effects. When you are able to replicate them, they're usually not that large, especially when you compare them to something like playing sports, which is not villainized in the same way. And one of the very interesting, I wish I could remember the name of the researcher. If they're out there, I apologize. I'm sure many more people have worked in this field since then. But I remember meeting someone at a conference that showed some really interesting research around contextualization of violence in video games. And their hypothesis, which seemed very well supported with data at the time, was that when researchers talk about video games increasing aggression, a lot of that work is done by people that don't know or like or know anything about video games. So you often get like very bizarre comparisons of, comparing the very complicated and mechanically difficult M-rated games with, very comparatively simple and intuitive E-rated games. It reminds me of this anecdote. I got into an argument with another psychologist once where he had said to me, "So what? You're arguing that like mature rated games systematically differ from E-rated games on dimensions besides violence?" And I was like, "Yes, obviously. if you were into video games at all, you would obviously understand that." But he threw that at me like it was this gotcha. But it was like, bro, you're showing your hand here. Anyway. The point is, the work that these researchers were doing was very interesting because they had shown they were really only able to replicate these effects of, short-term boosts on aggression and just subsequent punishment games or whatever, if they were basically throwing people into the pool with no context, no explanation, no nothing. They just threw them in front. Like one of the examples they gave that I found very compelling was one of the Dead Rising games. If they threw them into the game and they were like, well, the objective of you're just like killing zombies, kill as many zombies as you can, they were able to get, on subsequent tests, and they've done all these tests of like, giving people hot sauce and blowing hot air in their faces as like punishment for failing a task, as various lab ways that they measure aggression. They were able to see that like bump in aggression. But when they actually explained the real plot of the game of like, okay, you're in this zombie breakout and you're trying to like find this cure and you have X amount of time, right? Like they gave the actual story of the game. They did not see any effects in aggression. And they'd done this with like other games too. But what they had found is when you contextualize the violence, which the narrative within the video game typically is going to naturally do, you're pretty effectively able to make any effect on aggression disappear, to the degree that those effects are consistently reliable at all, which they're not, right? And one of the things that many of those researchers leave out is that they're not presenting the game in a naturalistic context where you would play it, right? They only show you like, here's 2 minutes of like, here's a fight in God of War, and we're not going to explain anything, and it gets your blood pumping and what have you, and you're maybe frustrated because you barely understand the controls of the game or whatever. It's very unnaturalistic interactions with games that often stem from those researchers not, having any enthusiasm for the medium, and not knowing these kinds of rudimentary things about the way that most people engage with games. Now, all of that being said, I do think that there absolutely are legitimate criticisms and legitimate things that are dangers that maybe ought to have more regulation. And you touched on it earlier. A lot of this stuff with like loot boxes and what's effectively gambling and the various insidious tricks that they use to try to maximize the amount of money that you spend, and having those microtransactions creep up, and no guarantees of a prize and whatever. Like a lot of the stuff that you see in like these FIFA My Team and stuff, or Madden, whatever. That's brutal. Roblox is one I hear a lot about, where it's like technically free, but they've got all of these very insidious, as far as I'm aware, totally unregulated things where you take, one step forward and you step on a tile and it throws a prompt in your face to try to get you to buy something. And the stuff that they're selling is, absolute garbage, and they're preying on little kids that don't understand that stuff better. So, yeah, I think that there is a lot of basically predatory gambling tricks that are oftentimes targeted at children, and that's very bad and very insidious and far worse than anything with violence, demonstrably so. But lo and behold, you don't really see people making a big deal out of that because, many of the mechanisms through which the media expresses these opinions about video games being bad are also all in on like the gambling and the sports gambling and the crypto and all that kind of stuff. So they, of course, are deliberately turning a blind eye to it. So it's obviously, as you can imagine, very frustrating to see all of this attention and blame being placed on things that, aspects of video games that are, maybe marginally harmful to give them the maximum benefit of the doubt, marginally harmful in very specific constraints and circumstances, and then seeing like no focus at all and super underplaying stuff that is massively harmful and is having clear, obvious deleterious effects on tons of people. Gambling addiction, rooted in, a lot of times video games are how they get started with that stuff, because they get into one of these 2K games and the gambling that's built into those, and it turns into other forms of gambling and brutal stuff. So I would sure love if the attentional spotlight around that stuff was the other way around. I think we would all be a lot better off, but we do live in hell world, so worst possible outcome for everything all the time, baby.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I want to maybe tie it back and bring it back to the question. Thank you for engaging me with, blurring the lines into your actual career and your personal thoughts and all of these things outside of the question at the top of the episode and everything as well. But this is super fascinating. I mean, I hope that listeners are quite enjoying this. I mean, I don't see how they can't. I mean, this is just a really super interesting insight. Just think about games from a different angle and a different perspective, and that's the whole point, is to have a conversation about those things. But to wrap it up and to tie it back into that question as a whole, was there anything more that you wanted to maybe touch on, or even recommend or highlight or shine a spotlight on from those interests that you have, both in the published books and the academia of it all, for things that you're involved with outside of gaming? Anything else you want to kind of put a bow on before we're done?
No, not beyond the things I've mentioned. I mean, I think that there are a lot of people doing great work in this space, and if you fall, I mean, look, if you're listening to this show, you're probably, a little bit more engaged with the medium, and you maybe follow some of the journalists. I mean, folks like Jason Schreier, do a lot of great work, and I'm a big fan of like Jeff Gerstmann, who talks about this stuff on his show sometimes. He's got some kids, so the insidious nature of this Roblox stuff is something that jumps out to him as well. I think those are good avenues. Kotaku has had some quite good coverage of various different pieces of video game research, so I think those are good resources. Chris Ferguson is a researcher that I think does a lot of good work in this space. So if you're curious about from a more academic, I want to see some of these, papers with p-values looking into all this stuff. He's a good resource for that as well. So, those are a few places people could potentially, chase up more information about this kind of stuff if you're interested.
Awesome. That kind of did double duty for me. I've been trying to end episodes with other recommendations and kind of a pay it forward approach and everything to other folks of interest that maybe we should be paying attention to. And so you just highlighted a bunch of great folks right there that we can definitely look at and read more about. But Fredo, this has been really fun. Like I said, this is a new question, so being able to kind of like answer this in a different way, especially from a unique perspective from you, like tying in your real life career into it all, was just really interesting to hear and learn and discuss about. And I've way more like thoughts, and this conversation could go a lot longer, but that is it. We did the thing, and we successfully answered the question for the episode. So hopefully you all enjoyed the episode and listening to it. Our goal is to have Fredo back on in the future as well with some episodes, so pay attention to the podcast feed, listen to more of us in the future as well. Anything else you want to say? Again, I will have those notes in the show notes below for your Twitch channel and your Bluesky handle. But anything else you want to say before we wrap it up and call it a day, Fredo?
Thanks again so much for having me. I mean, it's a fascinating topic. We could probably do 100 episodes on this. There's all sorts of interesting research out there, and, plenty of stuff I haven't hit on. I know that there's neurologists doing stuff around brain chemistry and this stuff that makes arguments on both sides. So, I'm not necessarily a resource that's going to explain everything, but I hope that folks found this interesting. And I haven't even gotten into my whole thing about like the anti-woke. That's a huge thing I talk about online all the time. So I know we're wrapping up for now, but if you're interested in that and my thoughts on it, please give me a Bluesky follow and check out my my stream because the sort of grievance culture around video games that in my opinion is often coming from a lot of people that are similarly disengaged from the hobby is very fascinating, and I find that stuff sociologically very, very interesting. But yeah, give me a follow on Bluesky. I talk about this stuff all the time, and I will obviously be happy to come back and talk about some other topics. I'm chomping at the bit to do that. So delighted to have been on. Really appreciate the invite, and great stuff. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I forgot we talked about that in chat about the anti-woke idea. Like that is something we should have dabbled in here, but that just means there's more reason to come back and chat more.
Yeah, future episode.
So Rad, thank you.
Damn, folks won't even let you do an episode about wokeness.
Damn it, we lost until we can win. We've currently. Oh, this is not good. But thank you so much again. Y'all check out the notes below. Give them a follow. Thank you for listening to the show for another week. If this is your first episode, it's a wild one. That's really cool. Go back. There's 116, 117. I don't even know at this count. I don't have it in front of me. There's a bunch of early episodes, and there'll be a bunch more in the future. There's new episodes every week. Check out pixelsandpolygons.net for all the books and zines and things that I do. Check out my Patreon if you do want to get early access and get other perks like review of the month postcards. And otherwise, I hope to have you back and listening again next week. Goodbye, everyone. Have a good one.
Bye forever.
Hello, we are Kirby Conversations, a podcast on Kirby along with adjacent subjects like Smash Brothers, HAL Laboratory, and other related Nintendo games.
In each episode, we take an in-depth look at a new Kirby topic, drawing on our decades of experience with the series. I'm Sean Douglas. I'm a writer and podcaster with a background in video game and theater journalism.
And I'm Gigi, the editor-in-chief of Kirby and a big Kirby fan from Brazil. I translate Kirby interviews from Japanese to English and research a bunch of obscure Kirby media.
And I'm Bridget, a longtime fan, commentator, fan artist, and Kirby collector.
Join us for a mix of commentary and original reporting, deep dives into Kirby history, interviews with industry professionals, and more, as together we explore all things Kirby and HAL Laboratory. We're a proud part of the Soundstone Podcast Network, and you can find Kirby Conversations on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.